Well, in the last few lectures, we have discussed briefly about the background for the establishment of international organizations like League of Nations and United Nations organizations. Today, we shall be discussing on the human rights aspect, especially in the context of international organizations, the UN Charter. Human rights is a contemporary topic of international law and system. With the establishment of the United Nations in 1945, the recognition and realization of human rights and fundamental freedom of individuals have become the most important concerned issue of the global organization. As a result, human rights issue has also emerged as an indispensable element for restoration and maintenance of international peace and security. The specific inclusion of human rights provisions in the UN Charter also reflects the ultimate reaction of the world community to the horrors and terrors of man-made wars and conflict. The bitter experiences of two devastating world wars eventually led to a firm conviction to incorporate the human rights provisions in the UN Charter. Those initiatives undertaken by the world community also mark a new beginning for the promotion and protection of human rights, which was primarily vested in the nation states before the United Nations Charter was adopted. Now let us see how United Nations Charter was adopted by the international community. The Allied nations who fought against the Axis power in the Second World War to destroy dictatorship and to secure democracy for the world resolved to establish a new world organization rather than to revive the League of Nations. It was in London Declaration held on 12 June 1941 that all nations who fought against the Hitler regime made an announcement for working together under a strong international organization. The actual term of United Nations was primarily used by the President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the declarations adopted in January 1942. Thereafter, a series of global efforts were made after holding negotiations and meetings among the nations at different places of the world. Especially for adoption of world constitutions, inter alia and international organizations. Finally, a proposed framework of such global system was framed in the meeting held in Washington in 1944, commonly known as Dumbarton Oak Preparatory Conference. This was the first concrete global step toward the creation of international organizations in the post-Second World War. And subsequently, the said draft proposal was also discussed at Yalta Conference held in February 1945, in which all the heads of powerful countries like USA, UK and Russia took part in the said deliberation. The draft Charter of the United Nations was finally signed on 26 June 1945 at the conference held in San Francisco, USA. The United Nations was also formally established on 24 October 1945 as an international organization. Well, in this regard, what we need to see is what are the provisions incorporated in the UN Charter dealing with the human right promotion protection. The inclusion of human rights provision in UN Charter also reveals that the promotion and protection of human rights constitutes as one of the vital objectives to be realized by the United Nations and its member states. The term human rights and fundamental freedoms are referred to the preamble and 7 other provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. So such inclusion of human rights provisions in the Charter has in fact created a very basic foundation of international contemporary human rights jurisprudence. The preamble to the Charter in this first paragraph lays down that we the peoples of United Nations determine to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and the worth of human persons, in the equal right of men and women. The basic purposes of United Nations are laid down in Article 1 of the Charter, which aim at developing friendly relations among the nations based on respect for the principles of equal right and self-determination of peoples and taking other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace and security. It further states that one of the purposes of the United Nations is to achieve international cooperation in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and freedom of all without distinctions as to race, sex, language or religions, etc. The UN General Assembly is empowered under the Article 13(1)(b) of the Charter to initiate studies and make recommendation for the purpose of assisting in the realization of human rights and fundamental freedom for all without any distinctions among the individuals. The General Assembly, as a part of its obligations, has adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and also many other international human rights documents. The other concerned UN human rights organ is the Economic and Social Council, which has the obligations under Article 62(1) and 62(2) of the Charter to initiate steps, study, recommend and to respect for observance of human rights and fundamental freedom for all. The Council began to activate its mandate by setting up the Commission on Human Rights in 1946 and a Commission on Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minority in 1947. The another important part of the Charter is the trusteeship system of the United Nations, in which the main objective for the system is to encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedom in the dependent territories. It is basically to maintain equality among the individuals, irrespective of various inequalities, and to encourage recognition of interdependence in the world. It stresses on the importance of international cooperation and coordination for the promotion of economic and social welfare of people of the world. Apart from these provisions of human rights enshrined in the UN Charter, it is also interestingly referred to the concept of human rights, dignity, worth of human persons, equal right, fundamental freedoms, liberty and justice, among others, in different parts of the charters. So therefore, the inclusion of such provisions in the Charter has undoubtedly created a new dynamic and dimension toward the progressive development of positive international human rights law and systems, where individuals have virtually occupied a focal point of such international system and rules it. In other words, the United Nations Charter has universalized the concept of human rights. After having gone through all the relevant provisions of human rights as set forth in the Charter, it is found that the term human rights and fundamental freedom are neither defined nor enumerated in any provisions of UN Charter. However, during the passage of time, a number of international documents on human rights, along with the implementation and enforcement mechanisms, have been adopted under the auspices of United Nations within the framework of the UN Charter. The other interesting aspect of United Nations Charter is that of domestic jurisdiction clause, as set forth in the Article 2, Clause number 7 of the Charter. That seems to create some riders for the United Nations and its organs, especially in dealing with human rights issues occur elsewhere in the domestic jurisdictions of a state. It is also quite apparent that human rights issues has undoubtedly become an international concern in the post-United Nations. The very glaring example is the United Nations legitimate interventions in the various issues of human rights violations which took place around the world in this regard. The United Nations Security Council may take appropriate actions against the perpetrator of gross violation of human rights under the Chapter 7 of the Charters. The UN Charter represents a significant advancement not only for the maintenance of friendly relations among the nations based on respect and mutual cooperation and understanding, but also for promotion and respect of human rights. It also provides a wide scope for further development in the field of human rights, for which all principles organs of United Nations such as General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the International Court of Justice, the Trusteeship Council, and the UN Secretariat are obligated to achieve the ambit. Very interestingly, there is no express provision or references to the protection of human rights in any part of the Charter. The initiatives so far undertaken in the area of human rights by the United Nations and its agencies have invariably shown the increasing amount of United Nations positive actions in the matter of human rights issues. The UN history is also found to be closely linked to the activities of non-governmental organizations, in short NGOs. The international human rights NGOs, consisting of private individuals from different walks of life, are the apolitical and voluntary organizations which made significant contribution to the international standard setting norms of human rights. They are also consulted by the UN and its agency in making United Nations policies and programs on human rights. This is also a fact that the Economic and Social Council of United Nations is mandated under Article 71 of the Charter to make suitable arrangements for consultations with the NGOs which are concerned with matters within its competence. Therefore, the work and the contributions made by the human rights NGOs are recognized under the UN Charter. To mention some of those international NGOs which have obtained consultative status of UN, particularly in the area of human rights, they are the Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, International Commission of Juries, and International Committees of Red Cross, among others. It is worth mentioning that such international human rights NGOs have not only acted as an independent or indispensable partner of UN for the adoption of global standards and norms of human rights, but also become a stakeholder for the implementation and enforcement of human rights laws and programs. Even in Indian domestic legal system, the credential roles of human rights NGOs is recognized under Section 12I of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. The global initiatives and programs adopted under the banner of United Nations, especially in the field of human rights, are being carried out so as to realize the very purposes and objective of United Nations. All the principles organs of United Nations and their subsidiary bodies have made their meaningful contributions to the development of human rights law and rules for all the people and all the nations. To mention some of those unique contributions made in the area of human rights are such as protection of rights of women, children, workers, minority people, migrants and refugees, among others. Apart from these developments, which are brought under the specific international multilateral treaties adopted by the United Nations, the prohibition of commission of various inhuman crimes such as genocide, apartheid, racial discrimination, torture, crime against women and crime against children, crime against humanity and peace have also been brought within the fold of the positive international human rights law and system. Thank you very much.